What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Robbie Hardy. Robbie Hardy, I'm excited to introduce her formally. Before I introduce you, Robbie, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. This is part of the Top Women Leaders series and also author series. But there's a really interesting interview with Dame Stephanie Shirley. And this reminds me of your story a bit, Robbie, which is she went by Steve for a long time because she didn't want the bias of being a female trying to get business. But she started, I think, one of the early on software companies in the UK. And it's really remarkable. She ended up taking it on the London Stock Exchange.
Wow.
She employed 8,500 people at one point. And she's given away over 67 million pounds of her personal wealth to different projects from all the success she had. But a remarkable story. She also wrote the book, Let It Go. So that was a really fun one. Another one that was interesting is Frances Hesselbein. Frances Hesselbein was the president and CEO of the Girl Scouts of America. And she ended up winning awarded the presidential medal. But just like an amazing story of leadership from her. And there's so many more, but those are a couple of my favorites that remind me a bit of your story. And so,
well, I thank you for that. Is an honor.
We'll dig into your books and what you're working on. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. So Robbie call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it easy for the host so they can just develop amazing relationships and, most importantly, run their business. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com to learn more. Robbie Hardy is an author, investor, entrepreneur with extensive startup and board experience. She's developed corporate strategies for Fortune 500 companies, worked as a strategic consultant with the Kauffman Foundation. She's an executive mentor in residence at Duke University. She's a founder of xElle Ventures, an angel fund for women investors investing in female founders. Also has coaching clients, also has just numerous other activities. She wrote 2 books, Upsetting the Table and Fed Up to Startup. And Robbie, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I want to hear some of the lessons. You know, you were 25 years in corporate America, but I'm going to fast forward to when you started your first company. And there's one of my favorite stories from the book is with the 8 ball. So
was what? The 8 ball?
With the 8 ball, yes.
Yeah.
Tell us the story around what was going on at the time.
So this was when I was selling my first company, but I wasn't looking to sell it. You know, I was still in the growing stages. I had just raised angel money and I was looking to raise venture capital. And I was at a trade show and I got a call afterwards that I thought was a prank. And I didn't return it. And finally, they called a colleague of mine, which is why having a community and a network is a good idea. And they're like, she won't call me back. So long story short, I was introduced to this company they were a hardware company. It was actually Seagate, the hardware drive company. And they didn't like how the world was treating hardware companies, and they wanted that software multiple. So I had a scheduling product that used PCs during the day, et cetera, at night. So they wanted that to add to their portfolio. And I had been back and forth to California a few times to talk with them, et cetera, but it was time to come to finally talk price, because this is a long process to sell your company. It may seem like a easy, quick fix, but there's no easy button here. And I was trying to save money because I was still bootstrapping and trying to do everything, as cheaply as I could. So I worked with my board, came up with a walkaway price, and off I went to California with my CTO, who was going to be meeting with their CTO, and I was going to be in the room by myself. And I didn't really think about it until I was on the plane. And I, had my corporate training that said pausing in negotiations is really important. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to pause because I didn't bring my lawyer. So there's a lesson there. Always have your lawyer with you. And so I don't know how this happened. I was thinking, what can I do? What can I use? I was, imagining. And so I came up with, I should buy a Ouija board. I'd never used a Ouija board, but in my mind, that was the right answer. So the next morning I go to Toys R Us. It was still open then. And they're like, no, man, we don't have Ouija boards, but we have 8 balls. Now I'm running out of time. So I'm like, great, I'll take it. Get in the car, rip the stuff off, throw the 8 ball in my briefcase, no clue how I'm going to use it. And we start talking about price and back and forth. And we're at the point where I know that we're too far apart and I'm trying to figure out what to do. So I reach down and pulled this 8 ball out. I actually have it here. And sort of said, well, let's see what she has to say. And the other people, I was, of course, the only woman, pound hands on the table like, oh my God. And the CEO grabs my hand, takes me into his office and shows me this. It's like a Buddha. It's a fancy 8 ball with an 8 ball in it. And we bring it back and he wants to have an 8 ball contest. And I'm like, oh, this is a bad idea. Anyway, long story short, there was a lot. We got to the price without the 8 balls, although we did try them out after we had agreed on a price. And I think, they said anybody who is willing to, put it out there in a very different way than we have ever negotiated any kind of deal in all of our years. And so I'm not recommending it, but it does at all. I mean, I don't want anyone to take this as a lesson and go buy an 8 ball to sell your company because it's not a good idea. However, what the lesson is, sometimes thinking outside the box and trying to, do things a little bit differently that work for you. So yes, and that ended up being our deal symbol and all the investors got it and all the employees. And so, yes, it lives in infamy.
And so if someone's not familiar with, it's not the pool 8 ball we're talking about the ones where you shake up and yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully you can edit this out here.
No, go ahead. As she's getting it.
I should have brought it over here. I don't think about it. Sorry.
It's where you shake it and it shows
it's the 8 ball that you shake and it says, will I be rich? And it says, I don't think so. So there it is. And it's got the deal material on it. So, and here's where normally see how there's So it was one of these, $3 8 balls.
So when you pulled it out, did you say we're too far apart? Let me see what the 8 ball says.
I just said, well, I'm not sure that I can live with that. And I pulled it out and said, well, let's see what she has to say. No. Yeah, this was, I was in the right place. It's like when selling the company, being in the right place at the right time and recognizing it. Somehow I felt okay. I guess I felt like I had nothing else to lose because I didn't know what else to do.
Well, I'm glad they didn't have a Ouija board because they may have just kicked you out. Like, what?
Well, plus I didn't know how to use it. So
you talked about, bootstrapping. At what point from bootstrapping did you decide I need to raise money?
Cash flow. I was selling into enterprise customers software, and that sales cycle is long and expensive. It's still long. This is a long time ago, but it's long, and cash flow is death. And so we did consulting. The company that I left to go into entrepreneurship, they were my first client, and so we did work for them, by day and built the product nights and weekends. Then I raised some angel money. And then I knew that I needed more money. And so I was going after venture money. Now, I was a woman CEO of a technology company. in, the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina in 1995. So this was, pretty weird. But I had the corporate experience. And so I just didn't know enough to sort of not be bold and go for it. And so, yeah.
The company you started was the need, and it was born out of some of the stuff you were seeing in the corporate arena?
Right. Well, we were developing as a consulting firms that I had worked for, and in almost every solution that we proposed and built for these large companies, it was the Mobil Oil and the GlaxoSmith, it was big, big business. And there would be some of the same elements in it. And I was frustrated because the only way we were rewarding employees was by how many hours they billed, which is never a good thing, in my opinion. And so I suggested several times, why don't we build some software that have kind of the core pieces, and then we can, you build it once and sell it many times. But the business model was a publicly traded company. The business model was hours, not product.
Consulting.
So, yeah. So I just, that was one of the things the Aspens told me. So it's like, stop talking. It's like, a lot of things I've learned, stop talking about it, look in the mirror and start doing it.
What pushed you over the edge to start your own company? Because when I look at it, you've been doing it for 25 years, successful at it. You could have just kept doing it. What was that impetus to actually start your own and not just stay in the corporate?
Success is measured many ways. So it had all the the LinkedIn kind of success, the right title, the right salary, the right perks, all that kind of stuff. But I was not fulfilled. I always felt like a round peg in a square hole. I had this vision of a culture I wanted to be able to develop for my team. So the way I dealt with it before I left was to offer up that I would, if there was a new project or a new division, I would take it. It would have to go into different space. I could sort of, do my own thing. And so it was and when I finally started thinking about so that propelled me to, go off and think about it. And then actually doing it, it just made sense to me. And I just decided to do it and put everything I had into it.
It's a big leap.
It is
at least at the time. Maybe looking back, it doesn't look like
it. No, I remember it well. It's a big leap.
Yeah. Talk about that decision and what you went through to actually get to that place. Because maybe there's someone listening and they're at that point where maybe they feel unfulfilled. Maybe they're like, it's nerve-wracking to think about.
It is, because you don't know what you don't know. So that was the first thing that I realized as I started thinking about it. It was easy to get excited about what I could build and maybe where I could find people to be, because I'm not technical. I'm the management side of things. I know enough technical to be dangerous, but that's where it ends. And so it's hard to know what you don't know. And so you're trying to explore. And this was Google, and I couldn't look everything up to see what I needed. Now you can do a lot of research online and learn a lot that I didn't have. But it is that, what's the worst thing that can happen? I had learned that from, somebody sort of, when we'd be going through things, what's the worst thing that can happen? And so I decided the worst thing that's happened is it would bomb, and I'd go back to consulting. I wasn't any different. Those were the daytime conversations. The nighttime conversations were very different, what nightmare about. But you're thinking about what's the worst thing that's going to happen and what could be the best thing. And I don't think anybody takes the leap thinking about how much money they're going to make. They take the leap. I certainly did, to see how I could change what I was doing and how I could, change it for those who were going to work with me. We always, the entrepreneur in you always thinks there's a better way and that you have the answer. So
what were some of the sacrifices when you look back with starting your own company?
Well, since we were bootstrapping it, and so cash flow was always a nightmare. And so I would pay myself last or not pay myself at all. And that, and so I was married, I had children. And so things that we had to, it was the personal sacrifices clearly were big, but also professional sacrifices where, if you wanted to go to do something, meet somebody or whatever, I was always, driving a long way to get a cheaper flight and, always looking. And in hindsight, the experience was great. I wished I'd had it before my corporate one, because the lack of money made me very agile. It didn't feel like that then, but it certainly does. I mean, I look back and thought, why would I have done that? But it's how we got through. Now, sometimes the agility of saving money is overthought, is not the right thing. I should have brought my lawyer with me to my deal meeting, but it is, it's that agility. So yes, the highs are high and the lows are low.
I don't know if you thought about starting a few things before or you did, but I think I read somewhere where there was like a toy company you were thinking about doing.
Yeah, I did start it.
Yes. You did?
Yes, creative interaction. There was a Color Me t-shirt for little girls and an Explorer pack for little boys, this is way back, trying to keep the screen time down before we really knew how bad screen time could be. And the funny thing is so I was doing that. And I happened to be sick, and I was lying in bed with an Excel spreadsheet. And it finally dawned on me. I had been so successful. I'd sold into Nordstrom's and Bed Bath & Beyond and all these great, quote, wins. But I wasn't ever going to make any money. I couldn't make it up in volume. The numbers just did not make sense. I knew better, but I was so in love with what I was doing that I lost sight of it. So that's yes. And so that was...
Talk about that decision.
That was a turning point.
Because, some people would have just kept going. Like on paper, successful is momentum. So what was the decision? How,
the numbers speak pretty loudly. I mean, and the lesson there is, pay attention to your numbers. I mean, it's so easy to romanticize. Oh, I know this next deal is going to happen. Oh, I know this is going to happen. And until you've got the purchase order or whatever in hand, it doesn't matter, because that's not going to pay the bills. I mean, I was making, when I started my company, I would make payroll sometimes on my credit card. So I'm not recommending it, but you go so far when you believe in what you have, and you'll do almost anything. And, sometimes you do almost anything to make it happen.
I don't know if I'm mixing up your book or an interview I watched, but you do talk about, I don't know if it's in Fed Up to Startup, about there's a point where the character with the payroll and how they...
That's true. That was me, and it was the character.
Okay.
So early on, this is when we didn't have any outside money, thank God. And so I did not have a payroll system. I didn't know that was a good idea. And so I was, paying people and doing all that myself, which I knew nothing about, but that never stops you. And so there was money in the bank, and I was short on cash. And so I took the payroll taxes and I used them to pay bills. The good news is that I knew better. I didn't know how. I mean, at the time I did it, it didn't seem so horrible, because oh my God, I can make this up in 30 days. No problem. Well, of course, it took longer than that. It probably took 60 to 90 days. And, when you realize what a big, huge mistake that is, it's not your money. And so one way that I, always coach everybody, get a payroll system. You never have an opportunity to be tempted, because it's not in your account.
What are some other, because I know you mentor a lot of people. Obviously, there's some lessons in the book with the payroll system, staying agile. What are some other lessons that you've imparted on some of the people you've coached or mentored? Yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I teach people a lot or coach them on is listening. Entrepreneurs can talk a lot. I mean, I could fill up your whole day, but want to talk about themselves or who they met or what they know. And with entrepreneurs, I want to meet them where they are. And I want them to remember to, meet others where they are also. So a lot of that is just life lessons, but it really, really makes a difference when you're trying to build a team and when you're trying to close customers, that you remember that, this isn't all about you. This is about your customer or your employee or whatever, and understanding where they are. Like, you do a lot of research on me, so you know where I am. or you think, you try to, so that you can meet me there, and it makes everything go much smoother and much better. And so that's kind of an overarching piece. I mean, obviously, there's lots of logistical issues, and raising money, and not getting out over your skis with cash, because cash flow, I mean, cash is king. And we spend a lot of time on that, and how it can appear that it's fine when it's not.
Robbie, talk about the books and why you decided to write each of them, because you're busy enough, you don't need to write a book, and also you're
But
super busy.
I did need to. So
All right, talk about it.
Yeah, so I started when in 1986. So some of the people in your audience weren't even born then. I had to quote, it was my first big job in the corporate world. I had an office, I had a secretary, I had a conference room, I'd made it. And I had this secretary, her name was Ruby. She was this young German woman, and she was amazing, but she had no idea how amazing she was. I mean, it was incredible. And so I started encouraging her, talk to her about what she wanted to do. And, she just wanted to keep doing what she was doing. And long story short, I started delegating some things to her that she wasn't comfortable with, but supporting her. And so she started growing. It was crazy. And I was hooked because she was succeeding. I was learning. So that began a long time ago. So I have been always mentoring on the side of my business side of it, 3 or 4 young women to help them find their voice and feel comfortable in their skin, et cetera, et cetera. So I decided when I sold my first company that I was going to think up this great way where I was going to empower millions of women to, stand tall and own the room. Well, obviously that was a pipe dream. And I finally, after all those years, decided, well, maybe I can write a book or 2 or 3. So I came up with 3 books that I wanted to write. And the first one was about a young woman climbing the corporate ladder. That's upsetting the table, and talking about mentoring and giving examples of, how to take your seat at the table. What does it really mean? And they're told as stories, so that it's, people will come up to me and say, well, what's Jessica doing? And sometimes I forget that Jessica is the main character in Upsetting the Table. And so the second book, so that was in 2016 that I did Upsetting the Table. And then last year I launched Fed Up to Startup. And that was based on my first startup experience as a founder and CEO of a technology company. And also in there, it was lessons about community, and how I could not have done anything that I did without all the people that I had met along the way. And, I had my airport squad. I had all these things that I didn't even recognize were so valuable. And so that's how the books happen. And the third book is going to be about its outline, but it's still, now life is getting in the way of it, but about women becoming angel investors and helping women understand how that works, because women like to know what they're doing. They don't jump in when they don't know if there's water in the pool, most of them anyway. And so trying to help them see that it's like anything else, it's just jargon, and that's how we're going to change things.
Which leads me to talk about xElle Ventures. And how did that come about? If you're watching the video part, there is a video part for one. I'm going to pull up the website here as we're talking about it, but talk about how xElle Ventures came about.
So in 2000, I decided I was an angel investor, and had been an angel investor for 5 years at that point. And I thought I was usually the only woman, or there'd be a couple of us. And I thought, it's time for there to be more women around the table. And I decided to raise a fund, and it took me 6 months to have 6 women. It was too early. There weren't enough, female founders who had exited. And so I opened it up, and probably 2 weeks later, I had 75 men. So my lesson was, that the lesson was too early, and there were also a problem with how I went about it. I couldn't imagine that there wasn't, a way to go about it. And so this time, in 2019, I invited 25 women to join me and talk about raising a fund to women angel investors investing in women founders. I had beat up all my male investor colleagues, and I finally got smart and realized I need to look in the mirror, and that women, we had to do this ourselves. We want to change these numbers. And so, in this image here, this is some of the 15 women that ended up staying with me as we launched xElle Ventures in August of 2019, and then it moved to a fund in 2021. So here are some of these women who are running the fund now. And Ann Miller on the, well, it's on the left of my screen. I assume it's on the left of everybody's. She's the current chair. And I met her, probably, I don't know, in 2000. And she was, she was doing CFO work, but she was working for people and not working for herself. She was very talented, very smart. And I convinced her to go off on her own. And then she and I did a couple of deals together. We had a vacation rental business in Hawaii together. And so we've done a few things. And, being part of xElle was never on her radar, but she had helped me run that first fund. And so altogether, she has come to be this amazing woman who totally understands how all this works and why it's so important. And she's the current chair of xElle Ventures.
Talk about the structure a little bit, because when we were chatting, it's not your normal VC fund and how you structure
No.
investing in companies.
So the investment is debt, not equity. For those who understand, equity is having shares in the company, and those shares, there's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of moving parts there, and it can take a while to get your money back or not. And when I was doing my research on starting this fund, I was talking to some groups of women who were investors, but they were investing in the public market. And they didn't quite understand. When I talked about angel investing, they were like, what is an angel? So anyway, long story short, after talking to everybody, I thought, well, everyone knows what a loan is. And I've looked at lots and lots of deals in my career, and there's often so much money that shouldn't have equity going towards it. It's maybe you can sell your product if you can get a better price on plastic or, boxes or whatever. And so ways to, bridge those cash flow gaps without giving away pieces of your company. So it works for both the investor and the founder. These women understood the process of lending money. And they were willing to put their toe in the water. We, brought the amount per person way down of what the minimum was in order to join the fund. Everybody still had to be an accredited investor. And so we talk with women who have companies who we can help with 25 to 100,000 in debt. It's 1 to 3 years. The rate varies, from, 7 to 11%, depending on what's going on in the market. And spend time mentoring them and helping them be successful so they pay it back either monthly or quarterly. We don't do any balloon payments, and knock on wood, so far so good.
How does the mentorship process work? Because I imagine that's a big selling point into why they should go with xElle Ventures.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, it's because they, there's people at the table that look like them, and so that's helpful in being able to understand the person across from you. So the mentoring process works by the executive committee and the screening committee and due diligence, who meet with these people privately before they come to meet the whole membership. So they get to meet all these women from different backgrounds and different interests, and the mentorships happen organically. You can't make that, I don't believe you can make that happen. You can't force it. And so we look to see where the best match is. And so talk to them and say, what do you think about, would you like to spend time? Or one of the members will say, I really like this and I have some experience here. Let me see how I can help.
Talk about who's an ideal fit.
A company, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a company that, they need to have revenue. So it's not early stage, which my background is in early stage where, it's often pre-revenue. So, they have $15,000 to $30,000 a month in revenue, and they can afford a loan payment without and without a lot of effort, but it gives them, they get the money up front and pay for it along the way. There's no collateral or anything. So we do look at that part of it very closely. What do their projections look like? What are the repeat customers? All those kinds of things to see what the right fit is. And of course, the other thing is, while some companies really beg us to invest in them, we don't want to burden them with that debt, because it can hurt them in trying to raise other money, et cetera. So we're very cognizant of the impact on the founder. And so while sometimes it seems mean when we say no, it's really the right thing, and they can come back later.
What are some examples? I know you can't share names of types of companies. So to give people an idea of the type of companies who.
Well, I mean, it's all over. It's all over their place. I mean, there's a woman who's got a company she makes bras for women who have had breast surgery, and it takes care of all the leaking in tubes and whatever, and they can manage themselves. Another is a couple, as it turns out, who does a pet cremation in a way that's organic and supportive, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, I mean, it's hard to go too much further apart. But
I'm always curious, because I'm wondering the reasons why, like e-commerce, I could see they maybe have cash flow. They just need to produce more. Well, like, what are some of the reasons why they're.
Well, it's usually cash flow. I mean, cash flow, it can't be, if cash flow is too bad, then they can't afford a loan either. And so then we work with them. Okay, let's look at your business model. Let's see if there's something else we can do here. But it's oftentimes to get the price point down to increase margin. I mean, that's my favorite when it's that. We've had, a chocolate company who, wanted to go into, doing some private events, and so needed to upfit their space. They were doing really well, but couldn't, were very frugal in how they used their money. And so they were, trying to be very careful. So it's all that. It's the things that, it's not usually your core business, or it's, you need to be able to get a better price on ordering those bras so you can, have an affordable price for your customer.
I'm curious, Robbie, I know you've done a lot of angel investing. What's some of your criteria for that? Because I know it's a little different animal.
Yeah, completely different. Yeah, because it's equity investing. And so then, it's interesting, when I moved to, doing debt with xElle, it was so interesting, because one of the things we would always talk about with founders as an equity is, what do you think your exit is? Who might be interested in buying you? And when you're doing debt, I don't care. I just want them to keep growing so that we can loan them money again. In debt investing, we look at the numbers so much more deeply. And in the equity, we look at what are the projections? What's the feedback from the customer, or are there customers? What else is out there in the market, the competition? We look at all those other things. And really, at the end of the day, with the debt, it's, how much revenue do you have? How many customers? How many repeatable? What's in your pipeline? And, it's not that simple, but it is much simpler. There's so many things, because in an equity deal, it can be 10 to 15 years. And, we couldn't predict this pandemic. So, there's a lot of things that come into play that, that make a difference. Now, my equity colleagues told me I was really stupid because the returns were not enough. But the good news is the returns aren't as much, but they're consistent and they're steady, and we're not waiting for it. And it doesn't mean we can't do equity also, but we're filling a hole on both sides, allowing women, or people who are not experienced in investing, put their toe in the water, and giving the founders, another source of funds.
Yeah.
So I don't mind being called stupid.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you have a little lower risk, you have a lower return, right?
Yeah, I mean, the risks are, I have to say, the risks are the risks. I mean, you just can't predict what's going to happen. You think you're really wise. Well, you'll get your wisdom, you'd be eating it, because you just can't make up the stuff that happens.
How did the executive mentorship in residence from Duke University come about?
Well, I got a call or an email from someone saying, want to talk to me about this. They'd been referred by a colleague. So I thought they wanted me to come up with some people for them to put in the program. So I'm riling off people and he's like, no, 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 no. We want to talk to you. And I'm like, no, you don't. I have not worked for anybody since 1993. So I don't think so. I think I probably wouldn't last a week. Anyway, long story short, it has worked out. I decided to do it because I had so much startup experience, but I had not been in this world. And so what happens in a university, a mentoring program like that, you're working with professors or doctors or PhD students or whatever who have created something and they need to license, it belongs to the university, they need to license it out. And these people have, they have real jobs that are getting paid well, and they're, doing this, and in some cases they want to change the world. Other cases they want to be rich like their, colleague down the road, and others want to stay and just get a piece of the action. And we recruit a management team for them. It's fascinating, and it's experience things I would have never seen in my normal world. So I've been enjoying it. Well, they haven't fired me yet.
So the kind of work you do, are you doing similar mentorship coaching?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's mentoring. Yes. And there are 9 of us. And so some are I'm in the technology side and the others are, pharma and devices.
Love it.
Yeah,
Abby, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to point people to check out more about you. They can get any of your books. I bought it on Audible. It's fantastic. You can go to robbiehardy.com. You could also go to xElle to learn more. And I encourage people to check your books out for sure. My last question is just, I know you've mentored a lot of people. I'm wondering what colleagues or mentors that you have, and it could be distant mentors. It doesn't have to be someone personal, but maybe some of your favorite books out there that you've learned from as well.
I didn't, From Good to Great is a book I think a lot of. But I have to be honest, I don't spend a lot of time reading a lot of books because I'm usually doing it, whether for the good and the bad. But I didn't have a mentor, but upon reflection, because I get asked this question a lot, is that the men that I worked with mentored me and didn't know it. They were experienced. They didn't know what to do with me. And so I just was able to learn from them in a way that it was sort of not what you would expect. So I didn't have a mentor. As I came along in the corporate world, then I had a sponsor, which is to help you climb the corporate ladder, which I'm not a fan of because you can't really get what you need, other than greasing the skids as you climb the ladder. So I wish I could tell you, I think I had one or two. I think I had hundreds of men who had come before me, didn't know what to do with me and tried to help me. Not all of them, but a lot of them did, and respected and trusted me enough to, spend time with me and help me grow.
Any women leaders that you've, looked up to or admired?
No, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Maya Angelou. And there were not a lot of women. I was in technology, so there weren't a lot of women for me to know. It's a very different world now.
Yeah, no, I love it. I want to encourage people to check out your books. And whenever you're listening to this, the third book may be out as well.
Next year.
Upsetting the Table, Fed Up to Startup. Do you have the title of the third book yet, or is it still in the works?
It's right now. It's, Woman Up. And we don't know. It takes a long time to. And the other piece, when you asked about mentoring, which I didn't say, the other piece is that I was very fortunate to have a huge community of people. When I was traveling in the corporate world, I would meet other people doing sort of similar things, and we had different clients, and sometimes we had the same client. And we ended up forming this airport we called the Airport Squad. And so we'd try to meet from around the country at an airport where we'd have our layover, and we'd have a glass of wine or a drink or whatever. And those people also helped shape. They were they were amazing mentors and, helped me through a lot. And so the value of your community and your network is critical.
Amazing. Robbie, I want to be the first one to thank you. Check out the books, check out more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Robbie.
so much. I appreciate it.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.